Epic Week today has become something completely different than what it was originally. It's now this week-long game where thousands of people work together to unlock benefits and features that everyone on the Roleplay Repository can continue to enjoy essentially forever, years after the game is over. But it started out, year one was all about investing into the site and trying to give the site a future. So I gave it the name Epic Week because it was essentially a membership drive, the same way you'd see with NPR or all these podcasts. There weren't quite as many podcasts back in the day, but it was a call for people to become involved and to become members so that the site could continue on. And my pitch, essentially, to get people to invest into the site was to invest into it myself. So I released, oh boy, about half a dozen features and a ton of new character profile templates. I think that first year was actually when forum chat, where you can turn any forum topic into a real-time chat, came into being. That was the culmination of the first year of Epic Week. And honestly, it didn't goose the membership numbers in the ways that I wanted, but it did goose enthusiasm. When the site's second birthday was about to roll around, Darth Angelus approached me with this absolutely crazy idea. If I had known how crazy it was at the time, that's not true. I would have gone for it if I had known how crazy it was at the time. I just would have been better informed about how crazy it was.
So the idea of the Bug War was to create a series of videos that would show the community coming together and fighting this massive threat to the RP repository.
Which featured real characters that people played on the repository, a set of fictional characters who were essentially archetypes for common and popular roleplay tropes, like the princess, the hero, the vampire, even the space captain, and live action. I was going to feature in this film of his.
Topson, I will not allow you to eat me. Well, we don't have to worry about that, except nom nom nom. No!
Even though we'd made several other short videos before, we wanted this to be different. Because before we'd established several characters, like the hero and the princess. But this time, because it was Epic Week and a big thing for the community, we wanted the community to feel like they were part of the story we were telling.
So we put out an open call on the forums, essentially asking people to submit their characters, and then we took as many as humanly possible, and he would build the 3D model and I would do the art for the skin that would go on top of it. A few of them were going to have lines, and some of them, like Heimdall's dragon character, were especially challenging.
I wanted it to feel like the players behind those characters were working together, so players that I knew were friends, I would make sure that their characters were on screen together, because it really made sense that if players were coming together to save the RP repository, they would have their characters working together as well.
To give you a sense of how crazy this idea was, Darth Angelus lives in England and I live in the United States on the West Coast, so he had to hop a plane and come on over to Oregon. We took over a hotel room for, I don't even remember how long, several days. We pushed all the furniture around. We essentially built a green screen so that I could get into costume and act out being in this digital world he was going to create for us. And we definitely had to put up the Do Not Disturb sign on his door because we were actually pretty terrified what the maid service would say when they saw the level of alterations we had put the hotel room through. Don't worry, we put everything back the way that we found it before we left. No one would ever be the wiser. But we do have some pretty wacky pictures of us in that hotel room.
So then, of course, we wanted to have a massive battle, the kind of thing you'd expect in a big budget Hollywood film. Of course, we don't have a big budget, so we had to improvise a little bit, and the software I was using was called MovieStorm. This is the same software that I used for the previous RPR videos. It does have a few limitations, such as only being able to have a handful of characters on screen at once. Now this is kind of like 10 or a dozen at most. Then if you have more than that, it really starts to struggle. That made the idea of having a really big battle quite tricky, but after some experimentation, I figured out how to make it possible. As far as I know, no one had done this in MovieStorm before, and I don't believe they've done it since.
Fun putting that video together. There are some absolutely outrageous bloopers of me struggling with a pot on my head that was supposed to be a helmet. Another secret of that filming experience was that to get a really clean sound recording for the character voices, we actually we hung blankets, we taped blankets up on the sides and top and back wall of the desk that I was using as my home office at the time, and we both had to crawl under the desk, hang an extra curtain in front of it, and we were basically scrunched up under there in this makeshift sound room so there would be no echo at all. I still have the blankets that he took off of the airplane on his way in from England. He realized that the blankets they were giving out on the airplane were exactly the right weight to deaden echoes without overly heating up a room. So he brought me one of those blankets off the plane, and I still use it to this day when I need to record character voices. I put it over my head and put the microphone under there with me. So that second year got us a little bit closer to what Epic Week is now, in that it was a story about the community coming together to defend the roleplay repository from something that was going on. I still had all of the big feature releases, I still had all of the big template releases, but what it was missing was the actual interaction from the players. We had people's characters in there, and they had interacted to the extent that they had submitted those characters several months before, and we had held a contest to have people recording their own voices shouting battle cries, and we used that in one of the big battle sequences. But it wasn't the same as having them truly engage. Sensing that lack of participation, it was really still just a show that people watched, where I put out features, Darth and I put out videos, but they weren't a living part of it, and I wanted to get the community involved. So year 3, we held some major public discussions during our birthday week. We turned those community discussions into help articles that we actually still reference today and are still quite popular. The theme of that year was people before features. I believe I launched a ton of features specifically for groups because I wanted it to be a year about people getting together. I also launched for the first time during year 3 Epic Week the Find Roleplay search tool, admittedly in a more limited capacity than it exists now, but it was the start of that feature. It still wasn't where I wanted it to be, though. There just was still something missing. It wasn't quite epic enough. It needed to have something more to be worthy of that name. In 2014, I was thinking hard about what I wanted Epic Week, the site's 4th birthday, to look like that year. It had been just incredibly different every single year that we'd done it. The past 3 years had looked nothing like each other, and I was trying to figure out what would be a tradition that was epic enough, that brought the community together enough, that made people truly feel like part of that heroic family, this incredible adventuring team that I wanted the Roleplay Repository to feel like all the time, but in this really heightened way for the site's birthday. And the more I thought about it, the more ideas I had. And there was this one day where I had been given a headset and speech-to-text recognition software for the first time. And I remember putting on that headset and just pacing back and forth in my apartment, just ranting to myself for several hours, I think, and letting the computer just take notes. And it took pages and pages and pages of notes, which all sounded like the rantings of a crazy person. But what I came to was this. I wanted to have a portal that had different symbols around the edges of it. I wanted each symbol to be a puzzle that was unlocked by a specific word or phrase. And I wanted those puzzles to be hard enough that it would take multiple super nerds working together to crack them. I wanted there to be some kind of feeling of searching or questing involved in this, so to find the clues for what that phrase or word was that would unlock a symbol, you had to search the site. I had hidden the clues, sometimes really cleverly, sometimes just out in the open, all over the place. So in order to get all of the new features and templates that I was going to release for Epic Week that year, everyone on the site had to work together to unlock all of the symbols around this portal, thus opening the portal to prizes. That year we actually had 2 portals. The first portal was essentially fantasy themed, and then behind the original portal there was a second portal which was sci-fi themed. Each one had 10 pieces of trivia around it. And at that time, all of it was trivia, from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Lord of the Rings, all kinds of series that I really loved and I knew that there were many fans on the site of. That was the year that I knew I was really on to what Epic Week was going to look like for the Roleplay Repository. It still hadn't reached its kind of final shape, and it really still hasn't. It still changes every year, but the basics of that portal and the solving of all of the trivia riddles and the teamwork required to do it has continued on since then. So it's no longer me just dumping features on the site and telling people, please buy an Epic membership if you like all these features. It's me creating a plot line that the players of all of these heroic characters get to participate in and solve and be the heroes of themselves. It's also 100% a teamwork game. You can't advance without the help of friends, and the site advances together as a whole. So even if you aren't very active in Epic Week, or not active at all, even if you join years after that particular Epic Week, you still get the benefits of all of those features that were unlocked during that week. 2015 was the first year that Epic Week had monsters in it. I really liked the way that everyone worked together to solve the puzzles. I really liked watching people quest together to search the site for all of the clues, but I still felt there is just something missing here. There's still something more heroic that we could be doing, and from that was born this basically mini combat game. It was specifically designed so that every monster is essentially unbeatable by yourself. You have to get together a crew of between 2 to 10 other players to effectively tackle any given monster. We also released that year a RPG, sort of. It's an honest-to-goodness video game. My father at the time, from whom I learned most of my own programming knowledge, had been experimenting with building physics simulators just in his own time for fun. So we worked together to build a minigame starring Debut. Now I'm gonna have to back up because the other thing that happens during Epic Week is there are tons of contests, and one of those contests that's always the same every year is the genre mascot art contest. And one of those mascots that had been designed by our member Wizard was a creature called the Debut, which is essentially a double-butted horse. At one side appears to be the butt of a beautiful, serene unicorn creature, and the other, I think, is possibly some kind of knight's horse or a working horse, just a much beefier type of horse, but it's still just the butts of two horses put together. So we decided, because this creature was quite popular, that it was going to be the star of this pixel art game. And that was how weapons were put into circulation. Debut lives in Fortress 404 and has a magical cannon that can fire these weapons into the hands of the people who most need them. As a player, you help Debut navigate this very strange 404 fortress and kick the weapon from the treasury all the way through this shifting maze to the magical cannon, where you then launch it into the hands of people who need it. And once you've done that, someone on the site will randomly receive that weapon with a note saying it's from you, and then they can use that weapon to go and fight the Goblin Menace, who were spilling out of the portals. It turns out that we left the portals from 2014 open, and the Goblin army on the other side smelled our birthday cake as we were celebrating our birthday, and they came pouring through. So the plot of 2015 was, once again, solving the riddles on the portals. They were all new riddles this time, don't worry, in order to seal the portals to stop the Goblin invasion. There was a twist this time. Actually, two twists. The first twist was that you couldn't just make a guess as to what the word or phrase that would deactivate a seal on the portal at any time. You needed a clear shot. If there were too many goblins by that portal, they would interrupt your work. So you had to coordinate. If you were someone who was working on answering all of those trivia questions, you would have to coordinate with people, or pick up a sword yourself, who were fighting the goblins, so that you had a clear path to go and enter your guess. So we now had people questing and searching the site in order to find clues. We had people fighting goblins, we had people working out those clues to come up with guesses, and we had people playing the Debut RPG to get weapons out to the warriors. All of these elements, when they come together, really form the basis of what all of the Epic Week games look like today. The rules change a little bit. We have new features, we try out new things, sometimes things are retired, but typically you are working together to solve puzzles and trivia while fighting off some kind of menace that is disrupting our birthday. And once you have managed to advance all the way through that plot as an entire site, as a heroic family, then, and only then, do you get access to all of the features and templates that I've prepared for the site's birthday. So you all get presents at the end. Something interesting happened at the end of that Epic Week. After we sealed the first two portals that had been opened in 2014, it turned out that the goblins were constructing their own third portal. The theme of the trivia on this one was actually history or real-life mythology rather than fantasy or sci-fi, but the goblins brought with them the many-headed cyborg dragon to defend that portal, which was a major boss battle. The weird thing that happened was people saw that the many-headed cyborg dragon was brought to the battle in chains by the goblin, and people decided that this was clear evidence that the many-headed cyborg dragon was not there on purpose. It did not necessarily want to be engaging in this fight, and so I was presented by the membership with a petition that essentially told me, we are happy to defeat this boss that you've presented us with, but we want your word that once we've defeated the many-headed cyborg dragon, that you will make sure that it gets the proper medical care that it needs, and that it is freed from these goblins who have enslaved it, which was a incredibly touching twist I did not see coming. I had to contact the artist Justine, who had been doing all of the comics for Epic Week, and she created a series of rehabilitation portraits of the many-headed cyborg dragon receiving proper medical care and learning to interact with other dragons and deciding what it wanted to do with its life now that it had been freed. There was this running gag in 2015 because the flavor text from the weapons often mentioned, like, for example, if you missed with the battle axe, one of the things it would say was that you accidentally chopped down a tree instead of hitting a goblin. And there was this running gag that we were just an ecological disaster and that Forum Forest would never look the same again. That joke that the players were telling actually became the plot line of 2016. The haunted remains of Forum Forest needed the players to replant it and revive it because ghosts and other evil creatures had taken over it in its state of devastation. So instead of portals that year, the trivia questions were to awaken the forest guardians who would prevent monsters and ghosts and things from spawning in that part of the forest. The boss monster that year was a spider queen who the players named Blightzilla, and she was such a big baddie that the many-headed cyborg dragon actually returned and this year fought on the side of the players. That brings us all the way up to 2017. 2017 was, yet again, the most ambitious we had ever gotten with Epic Week. This time, we were going to space. Before Epic Week 2017, our 7th birthday began, in concert with Darth Angelus again, I released a series of videos essentially warning that an alien menace had been detected and it was on its way to invade our birthday party.
By 2017, I had moved on from the software that I'd previously used for RPR videos, and Kim will tell you that I had been bugging her quite a bit about creating something new with this new software because the characters are more detailed, the scenes look so much better, and I thought it'd be great to do something for RPR.
You need to see this.
One of the advantages of this new software is that I could do motion capture, which means I have a special suit which I put on. It doesn't look like the bright green suit with all the balls on it that you might have seen in behind the scenes videos from various Hollywood films, although the idea behind it is very similar. So in the Epic Week videos, not every scene, but most of them, the scenes, you'll see the characters moving. It was actually me doing that in my living room. So I was acting out the roles for the hero and the princess, some of the alien creatures that we encountered, and so on. Sadly, I did not record any footage of me doing this, so to give you an idea of what it looks like, this is some video footage from a different project that I was working on at the same time. So I went outside because I needed a long area to do some running in, and inside got too much furniture. So I went outside, did this thing. Again, like I said, It's 2 characters, so I had to do it twice. But if you watch this, you'll get the idea of how that works.
This year was the first year that the puzzles were not all trivia based. Many of them, about half of them, were based on clues that we had hidden in the comics, that we had hidden in videos, that we had hidden around the site, sometimes that were hidden in the clues for other clues. It was very convoluted and kind of evil and wonderful. There was even an alien language that Darth Angelus had designed that the aliens communicated in.
So with aliens invading the RP repository, I was thinking, what kind of language would they have? What about the alphabet? We could use that as a puzzle element. But if it's going to be a puzzle that needs to be solved, you can't just have a bunch of random symbols. It needs to have some kind of logic behind it. So after experimenting with a few ideas, I came up with the alphabet which you see in the videos and in the comics.
And over the course of the week, players, especially I believe Heimdall and Dragonfire, shout out to you geniuses, cracked the code and were able to interpret the alien language and the signals that they were sending back and forth to one another.
It was quite fun to watch them in the chat, working out the alphabet. And of course I couldn't say anything because I didn't want to accidentally let something slip and make it too easy. But yeah, I really enjoyed watching people solve that.
This was a really important experiment because for years people had said, I really want to be involved in Epic Week. I want to do the puzzles, but I'm just not good at trivia. So we created these self-contained puzzles that you didn't need any knowledge other than what was happening during Epic Week itself in order to engage with them, in order to solve them, and in order to advance the plot and help the entire heroic family go forward again. This was the first week of Epic Week where the comics that Justine did and the videos that Darth Angelus were doing were equal to one another in quantity. They told parallel stories. It was the same plot, but the videos essentially told a side plot of the main plot where we got to see our hero friends, the princess and the hero, those archetypal characters from the original Bug Wars video series that we did back in 2012. They went on their own mission to do some recon on the alien vessel, which turned up a bunch of the clues that players needed to solve the puzzles to get through the stages.
Out of ammo!
Energy crystals are dead.
One of the things to know about Epic Week is that it is always designed to be winnable, but it is always designed to strongly encourage teamwork, and it cannot be played solo in the sense that you can't take down all of the monsters by yourself. The trivia is designed to be really challenging, and it's meant to be discussed by 20, 30, 40, 100 people in order to sift through the ideas and get to the answer. The puzzles are designed to be challenging, but they're also designed to build one upon the other. So if you pay attention to the puzzles and their answers that have come before, you have a greater likelihood of being able to solve the later puzzles. But it's also designed so that you don't have to have played in any other Epic Weeks to jump in. Everyone levels up together. There is never a circumstance where one player is more powerful than another. One of my favorite things that happened organically was that I believe it was Novalin who started a group specifically to use the new group treasury feature so that players could share all of the different items that they were collecting, whether that was healing party hats or different weapons or seed pods. They could put them all into the armory, and anyone who was a member of that group could log in and take anything they wanted from the treasury, and people were very good about taking only what they needed and putting back what they could. That group, the Armory, has become a fairly official part of Epic Week now. I always recommend that players join it during Epic Week and donate to it, take what they need from it. It is so much within the spirit of Epic Week, of the Roleplay Repository itself, to work together, to pool our resources, to take care of one another. I'm not going to give anything away, but what I can promise is that it will definitely be epic.